torture and oppression. Let's raise our voice to be heard all around the world. Let's raise our voice.
The Maldives are a beautiful group of 1,200 coral islands, lying like jewels in the Indian Ocean, with white sand beaches and endless sunshine, just 500 miles off the toe of India. A kingdom under the protection of the British government until 1965, the Maldives became a republic in 1968, joined the Commonwealth in 1985, and started on the road to modernisation. At first, the Maldivians enjoyed positive improvements as the islands were transformed from a country reliant on fishing to the exclusive holiday destination we know today. Upscale tourism is now the biggest industry, delivering some 90% of tax revenues, yet with surprisingly little filtering down to the workers. 500,000 people visit the Maldives each year, 100,000 from Britain, yet the majority of visitors have no idea of the appalling political and human rights crisis in paradise. Because tragically, inside this perfect apple of a country, the rot was setting in, as the 27-year regime of President Gayoom slowly poisoned the core. The modernizer was fast becoming a corrupt dictator of a one-party state where freedom belonged to the past, not the future. The United Nations reported that 42% of the population were living on just over $1 a day, and that 30% of children under 5 were suffering malnutrition as severe as sub-Saharan Africa. Only 10% of children receive more than a basic secondary education, and the government spends more on arms than healthcare. Yet there are no internal or external security threats. Why, in a country which is apparently enjoying one of the highest per capita incomes in Southern Asia, are its people so disadvantaged? The homogeneous, peaceful Muslim population of just 300,000 deserve a much better deal, but Gayoom's increasingly Ba'athist regime has resulted in the subjugation of civil society, repression of all forms of dissent, and an iron grip on the media and communications. It was the murder of pro-democracy supporter, 22-year-old Ivan Nassim, brutally beaten to death by 9 police guards, which fundamentally changed the political climate and started to topple the totalitarian regime. Fellow inmates were outraged at his brutal death and started to riot. The police opened fire, killing 3 more prisoners and injuring 18. Word soon spread of the murders, and a crowd of 3,000 took to the streets. Government buildings were torched and ransacked, security vehicles burnt, and the police responded with force. News of the riots finally gained the attention of the international media, the story being featured across the world.
Holiday heaven on earth. Thousands of wealthy tourists flock every year to these exquisite islands in the Indian Ocean for the holiday of a lifetime. Blue skies above, crystal clear warm water, white coral sand beneath the feet. Paradise. But this sparkling image of perfection is very far from being the whole story. The Maldives were rocked by unprecedented rioting 3 weeks ago. These images smuggled out of the country are what the government did not want the world to see. We have spoken exclusively to one of growing numbers of dissidents, afraid until now to voice their opposition.
The moment they know you are a threat to the system, to the regime, you get locked up. And then you get, they could come after your family, they'll just destroy you completely.
One word out of place and this is where you are brought, opponents of the government say, to Mahfouzi jail. Critics say that prosperity from tourism in the Maldives has come at the expense of basic human rights. Many in the Maldives have profited from 3 decades of economic growth. But critics say it has happened at the expense of a proper stake in democracy. President Gayoom has ruled almost unchallenged since 1978. Does he have a record to be proud of?
I do.
So why is it then that people that I've spoken to in the Maldives are frightened to talk to me openly?
It's not true.
But they are.
I assure you that's not true.
Well, you're telling me I'm lying.
I'm not saying you are lying, but you are not well informed.
There is now a growing storm of popular disquiet. Holidaymakers see nothing of the darker side of life in the Maldives, but they are the economic lifeblood of these beautiful islands. Adam Minot, BBC News, the Maldives.
President Gayoom announced a reform agenda in June 2004, following pressure from the Maldivian Democratic Party, international media and foreign governments. This news was welcomed by the people, but the MDP were unconvinced that Gayoom's actions would match his words. However, pro-democracy forums were soon organised to discuss the road ahead. The government responded with a campaign discrediting the aims of the reformists, saying it was un-Islamic and against the interests of the country. Despite this, the reformists rapidly gained popularity, and to the surprise of Gayoom, the meetings became more and more anti-government in tone. On the 16th of July, the government responded by unconstitutionally banning the meetings. 3 days later, 24 reformist members of parliament walked out in protest at a government-rigged voting procedure to elect the new Speaker of the House. Gayoom appeared to panic and ordered a number of reformists to be arrested. In protest, a crowd of some 12,000 demonstrators gathered outside the police headquarters on the 12th of August. For over 18 hours, they demanded the release of the detainees. The government decided to release a handful of prisoners, but still people called for real reforms, the resignation of cabinet ministers, and finally, the resignation of President Gayoom himself. Suddenly and brutally, the police attacked the demonstrators with batons and tear gas. During 24 hours, over 300 people were arrested and a state of emergency was declared. The Maldives had never experienced such an unprovoked outrage. Over 100 political detainees have been held without charge and access to lawyers for 2 months. Many have been held in solitary confinement, and there have been reports of beatings, sexual assault and torture endorsed by Amnesty International. On September 16th, the European Union voted unanimously on imposing sanctions against dictator Gayoom's government unless the state of emergency was lifted, political detainees were released and basic human rights granted to citizens. In October 2004, the government started to make some of the changes demanded by the international community, but have failed to act with transparency. There are worrying signs that the Maldives are sliding into a pariah state, not ever to be trusted again. This view is echoed by many Maldivians. The pressure is on, both inside and outside the country, for genuine and lasting democratic reform, but confidence in President Gayoom and his government is waning fast. Time is running out for the dictator. His options are clear. Reform now or resign, and let Maldives be free.